Here's a question from Julie. My husband believes that the stories of the Bible can't be true because there isn't enough evidence to support claims like the Nephilim were giants or all of the miracles that took place. Is debating these things even a good tactic?
Well, the question is whether debating with a person like that is a good tactic, and it may not be, all right? Because I make this point a number of times in the story of reality, and the point is, what is plausible to an individual? This is called plausibility structure, right? What is plausible to an individual is the way that they see the world. And so a person like Richard Dawkins, for example, will go to the Bible and say, water into wine? Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Okay, well, it is ridiculous if atheism is true. And Christopher Hitchens, when he debated Jay Richards, interrupted Richards in the middle of his presentation, and he says, well, do you think that Jesus rose from the dead? And Jay said, yes. And he said, well, I rest my case. What case? It was a clever example of circular reasoning. It is only evidence against Christianity if Christianity is false and atheism is true.
Right.
Because what Christopher Hitchens is doing is he's measuring Christianity by the standard of an atheistic worldview. And what I say in the story of reality is this is just not fair to assess one worldview by the standards of an opposing worldview, especially when what's at issue is which particular worldview is actually true. And you have to assess them within their worldview. Now, look, if the Christian worldview is true, we live in a magical world. There is a material realm and there's an immaterial realm. There is a God who can penetrate the material realm and do things that are not consistent with the normal functioning of a material realm. And incidentally, as Frank Turk has pointed out numerous times, if the Big Bang is best explained, now here's my terminology, by the existence of a Big Banger, well, that's the biggest miracle of all. And if that miracle happened, then all the rest is small potatoes, okay? So if we demonstrate that we actually live in a world that is a miraculous world, then these things are certainly plausible. Then it becomes a matter of, do we have reason to trust the historical record if we are not ad hoc, kind of out of nowhere, simply disqualifying it because we don't like what the events that are recorded there, the nature of the events that are recorded there. I mentioned the story of reality, but I actually spent some time talking about this in a couple of places in the story of reality because this is really important, okay? Plausibility structure. If we have good reasons to believe in the Christian worldview taken as a whole, and I think the beginning is a good start. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, Big Bang, okay, well, the universe came into existence on both stories. What's the best explanation? Caused or uncaused? We've already talked about this. So that sets up the possibility then that the miraculous events in the Old Testament are reasonable in light of the world, okay? And I think that's what needs to happen. If a person can accept the existence of God, and this, by the way, happened with C.S. Lewis, when he realized that God was real, that all these other doors began to open for him. Plausibility. I just watched the other night for the second time, and I enjoyed it the second time more than the first, was the film about Lewis and his conversion. It's titled
The Most Reluctant Convert.
There it is, The Most Reluctant. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun, very well done, and it gives a good characterization of an individual having very, at least apparently, plausible objections against God's existence, and that comes out early on in the narration of this, to being completely turned around to a different worldview. And when he gets turned around, like I said, these doors start opening. So I think that's the strategic element here is to help people to see what kind of world we actually live in. Now, I think most people are aware that we live in a moral world. This is why they complain about the problem of evil. Morality is a real feature of the world, objective morality here. But what kind of worldview makes sense of that? Certainly not atheism. It's only some form of theism, and this is the moral argument. And I developed this very aggressively in a chapter in Street Smarts titled, Can We Be Good Without God? So I really work hard to develop that notion. That was kind of my apologetics swan song, so to speak. I was like, I gave everything I had to give on various issues, particularly on atheism there and morality, in a very clear way. Not swan song. That means my last one. But it's not exactly a magnum opus, but it's what I had to say about these issues, and I included it there. And so that's the approach I would take. Start with theism and the reasons for theism, and in particular the things that most atheists affirm are true, like morality. At least in a practical sense, they're going to affirm it. Which don't have any place in their worldview, but have a place in ours. This confirms the theistic worldview.
You brought up Lewis. I just reread his book on miracles, and he makes the same point. You know, what's plausible depends on whether or not God exists. You have to know if God exists first before you can know if miracles are plausible. So I think what I would do, Julie, is help him to understand that he's confusing worldviews here when he says that those just aren't plausible, therefore they didn't happen. Well, anyway, there are a lot of ways to argue this. You might want to read Lewis's book. It's just called Miracles.
Or Kokos.
Or yes, but his book, his entire thing is on that. You should start with Greg's, because at least you'll get the idea of what he's saying, because he goes into more detail just on his whole book's on miracles.
I'm kind of funning with you a little bit, but I do go into detail on some of these points in both the Story of Reality and also in Street Smart.
So to open up, because it's so funny, Greg, because this is exactly what my note that I wrote down was that you have to start with God. You have to start there, and maybe a way to do that, to open him up to the arguments, is just to say, would you grant that if God exists, then miracles wouldn't be implausible?
That's
and
great.
I think he might be able to grant that.
Yeah.
I mean, then you could.
Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
I don't know why anybody wouldn't grant it, because all you said is that miracles are plausible.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a deistic God, there's a God there, but he doesn't interact, so miracles don't happen on that view. But if there's a God, at least they're plausible, and then you got to decide whether God interacts or not. That's a separate issue.
So once you ask that question, would you grant that if God exists, then these are plausible? Then you can say, well, then your real issue is not with the miracles at all. Your real issue is whether or not God exists.
Right.
And now you've got it in a place where you can start with the foundation, and he might be open to it, and he'll leave those other things alone and not keep going back to them, because he might just be using those things to deflect any discussion about this. So if nothing else, it would kind of put an end to that, I think.